marking the Jewish New Year. A message from Chief Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs in 10 minutes here on BBC One Northern Ireland, after an update from the Crimewatch team.
Welcome to Crimewatch Update, and a few dozen Crimewatch viewers tonight are probably watching this update with a little bit of anticipation to see if we're onto them or not. In particular, the gang that stole that Leonardo da Vinci from Drumlanrig Castle at the end of August. Peter McAdam is the Senior Investigating Officer. We got terribly excited with a couple of calls earlier on. Bit more cautious now. There are lots of other calls as well that look very interesting, but tell us about those two.
I'm delighted with the response we've had tonight, Nick. We've had a lot of calls. We had two calls particularly quoting the same address, and it's not something I'm going to jump into. We'll have to do some research before we move on that. But there are a number of different lines of inquiry have come as a result of the calls we've had tonight.
Surprised the number of names that came forward, and people being quite specific, and in particular names for the driver, because we had the e-fit of a man who bought a car that was used in the raid, bought it in Edinburgh.
Yes, that's right, and we have a number of other lines of inquiry relative to that name. We've got some people to see.
Still haven't got the painting, of course. A massive reward that could make somebody rich. If they don't want their name to get out into the public domain, how do they claim it? If they want to remain anonymous?
They can either use the Crimewatch number, use my incident room number and speak to one of my staff, or use the
Crime Stoppers.
Crime Stoppers number.
Yeah, Crime Stoppers have got a well-worn routine for doing this. 0800 555 111. Crime Stoppers, you want to remain anonymous. Let's move on now to that dramatic footage from Doncaster's town centre CCTV. Police zoomed in as a man abducts a 16-year-old girl.
Where have you been?
Hyde Park.
Where are you going?
Carcraft.
Oh, long walk, innit?
Yeah.
This is DCI Richard Fuchs. Horrendous watching that CCTV, and of course there was a lot more we showed in the earlier programme and a good deal that we didn't. Police saved her. You also could tell from the cameras, and the police on the scene were pretty clear, he's very tall, that man, 6'5" maybe, as tall as that. And a lot of people seem to know 6'5" people in Doncaster.
That's right, he is a very tall individual, certainly well over 6 foot, very stockily built as well as we've previously described.
How many people have called in? Do you know the total number yet?
We've had well over 100 calls in relation to this particular incident, and there's a number of those that we're quite excited about and we'll be pursuing very quickly.
There was one I saw where somebody said, look, this is absolutely a dead ringer, I'm absolutely certain it's him, know him very well, lots of details and all the rest of it. So you've got several calls like that?
We've had a number of calls like that where people claim they do know this individual personally, and they'll be the ones that we're following up very quickly in the days to come.
Thank you.
We have plenty of calls on the four faces. They've been all over the place, to be honest, but some of them really promising. Now, Vincent Palmer, Vinny, remember he's been on the run for 6 years after escaping from Crown Court. The officers are just faxing details of some really promising good leads and some addresses back to their office, so that sounds good. Hayman Mustafa, he's wanted for murder. Had about 20 calls on him. One saying that he's seen him as a regular customer at the hotel in Dover. He was last seen there about a month ago, and another who worked with him in the West Midlands only about a week ago. Sounds good. Cameron Khan, also he's wanted for attempted murder. Lots of calls saying that he's in the Birmingham area. Also others with knowledge of him and his house in Spain, so they clearly know him.
Now to Charlie, the girl who was in Brighton 2 years ago and led a violent robbery against her own flatmates.
Look, don't hurt us. Just take anything you want.
What about their passports?
No, I need that.
Well, get their DVD player and the PlayStation.
It was very much like Charlie. He was directing everybody of where things were. And that was generally her role in the robbery.
I mean, when we showed this during the programme earlier on, we heard her name was Charlie, but you didn't know if that was true. Didn't know much about it. It was 2.5 years ago. But you've had a fantastic response.
That's right, we've had over 50 calls, a lot of which have named the same name, so we're confident we know who Charlie is now. Had lots of information personal to her, where she's from, what school she went to, her maiden name, her husband's name, the name of her children, including a recent sighting in Brighton from a taxi driver who picked her up and dropped her off.
But she didn't pay the fare. That's
Not
why.
all of it, that's right,
why he
yeah.
remembers her. Sounds fairly typical.
That's right, yeah, so we're confident we know who Charlie is, so it's just a matter of time now.
Brilliant. And what about the accomplices? Anything on them?
We've had some information about the accomplices, not a lot to be honest, but we have had one name put forward for the person who drove the car.
Well, terrific result on Charlie. Great.
That's right, yeah.
Well, we showed some really interesting CCTV footage this month, and we've had some equally interesting calls. Firstly, the police footage of the the drug exchange that went on in Peterborough. We've had a number of names suggested, although they are spread around the country. We are hoping to focus in a little bit more on the Peterborough area, so if you know Pablo Courtney, matching that description, keep ringing. Lots of names on the Peterborough deceptions this time, focusing on the Coventry area, which was hoping we'd find him. And finally, the Notting Hill bottle attack, that French tourist that was attacked completely out of the blue. We haven't had a great number of calls, so if you know who that was, please call. We can't have this happening at our carnival, can we?
This is a frame, or it's probably called a cell, from that wonderful film, The Snowman, based on the Asa Briggs book. And 22 cells like this have been stolen. We appealed in the main programme for information on this. We're hoping that in the next few days, because people have to look around to get information on this, people will see that somebody they know has got a picture like this. They may still be just individual